That we're live. Well, good evening, everyone. Good evening, good evening, good evening. We're here live on Facebook on this Thursday evening. We're late, but we have great information for you. My name is Bishop Orlando Findlayter. We are the United Covenant Church of Christ, and we're here to share great information with you. In a real sense, this is a follow-up to last night's conversation. We are still in a global pandemic, and COVID is still very much alive. And so we're dealing with the COVID vaccine. Our colleagues had a great conversation last night, and tonight we continue the conversation. I am here with my co-host, my brother, my colleague, my friend, Pastor Terence Priester. Pastor, how are you?
I'm doing all right. I'm doing all right, Bishop Findlayter. So yes, hello everyone that is viewing with us today. I'm Pastor Terence Priester. I am the Social Justice Director for the Southeastern region of the United States for the United Covenant Churches of Christ. And the purpose of our meeting tonight, the purpose of tonight's event is so that we can come together to receive information about the COVID-19 vaccination. During this event, we'll be able to direct our questions and ask the experts. They'll provide us information about this vaccine and hope that you will be able to make an informed choice. As we know, there are some individuals who are unsure and perhaps reserved about whether they will or will not take this vaccination. And it is our hope that in concluding this event tonight, that they'll have all of the information that you need.
Amen. Amen. So again, we are part of the United Covenant Church of Christ. Our leader, our presiding bishop, is Bishop G.E. Livingston. And we want to empower our community. We want to inform our community. And so we certainly thank our presiding bishop for giving us this opportunity to share with you. And so let's jump right into the conversation. I want to introduce Dr. Stephanie Nance. Dr. Nance is a lieutenant colonel in the United States Air Force. She's a medical doctor. And Dr. Nance, thank you for joining us tonight. We appreciate you taking time to share with our community, share with the African-American community, to share with the church community that the vaccine is safe. So we're in your hands. Thank you.
Yes, and thank you for inviting me, Bishop. Let me see if I can share these screens. It looks like I have been able to. Can you see this screen? You
Yes.
can see the slide?
Yes.
Perfect. All right, so I am in the Air Force, but just know I'm not endorsing any projects, and this position is mine and mine alone as a medical doctor. Really quickly, vaccine hesitancy is a real and legitimate fear. I always try to differentiate it from anti-vaxxers, which are different. As I explain to my colleagues all the time, Black and brown people do vaccinate their children. We're just a little bit leery of these vaccines because of the atrocities of our past. So just briefly, from going from past to present, everybody knows the Tuskegee experiment, and we cannot ignore the fact that it did come from the U.S. Public Health Service. So even more reason to have issues with the vaccine, as this did come out of the government. However, and I can cite multiple times that this has happened, but in sake of time, we all know our history. And so I think that I will move on from this. Problems that came up were, and if I may, the last here, J. Sims, Dr. Sims, the father of gynecology, actually performed painful experiments on slaves, right? They had no rights, obviously perceived as property. And past has a way of repeating itself. So I bring this up only to show that still in 2016, medical students were polled, school residents were polled, and still had the perception that Black patients are less susceptible to pain. And we all know Dr. Susan Moore, the Facebook person who actually described this. She was a doctor herself, yet was ignored and happened to pass away after her discharge. So I present this in Myth and Fact forum. The myth that experiments at Tuskegee are still present is not true. In fact, they are not possible because 2 years after that horrible Tuskegee experiment, there are safeguards in place called the Institutional Review Board that protects human substance. So no reason to fear that. And I also want to bring out the myth that health equity is not a problem in the United States. And I believe a picture is worth 1,000 words. So if you look, equality is everybody getting the same. And you see in the second picture, equity is actually helping those who need it most. And so for our communities, you will see that Black and brown people are dying at twice the rate with COVID, but are getting vaccinated half as much. And that equation is not a good one for us to have. So people seem to think that COVID is unique. However, if you look at the maternal death rates for Black and brown people, even prior to COVID, Black women are 3 times more likely to have a maternal death. I thought the equal number that we are 2.8 times more likely to die. The similarity shows that this is not only a COVID-19 problem. And these are just more stats to that. So the myth that shady politicians cut corners to get the vaccine approved faster is not true. Just the red tape was cut. So I want to make the important point that there were no corners cut on the clinical trials. It is safe, tested, and true. And I always say, follow the money. See, the whole world was watching COVID. So all resources were shifted to make the COVID-19 vaccine. When you add money and manpower, you get a faster product. So even though people think the name Operation Warp Speed sounds like it was rushed, the vaccine protocols were not rushed. I bring this clinical trial side up just to show that the emergency use authorization is done when we find a product that can save lives and we push it out a little bit earlier. If you look at, we start with the laboratory studies in animals or fetal cells. Phase 1 deals with the safety. Phase 2 and 3 deals with how effective they are. So you see all vaccines get to phase 3, either emergency use and full licensure. The only difference is phase 4. And phase 4 is what is the long-term studies. We do not have the long-term studies for these vaccines. As you can see, they just came out a couple of months ago. But if you look at Pfizer, Moderna, and J&J, we have thousands of people in these trials. And HPV is a vaccine, and many of the vaccines that we have out had even less in the clinical trial than these vaccines. So understand that these went through the procedure. However, since they're life-saving, we didn't wait on the long-term trials. The early trials were enough. I know that vaccine information seems inconsistent, but truth is you are getting the data in real time as we have this internet era. And so it's only because science was unfolding and for all of us. And as far as people of color being excluded, not true. These vaccines actually had more minorities in them for the most part than the vaccines that we have. It's just that people of color remain underrepresented because access barriers, lack of information, and by the way, those historical and ongoing discrimination things make us a little bit less likely to raise our hand, and understandably so. Looking at these trials just to show the ethnicities of who presented in the trials, you will see that Blacks are represent about 12% and Hispanic about 17%. So you see we're slightly under the population. I have it there in red, 12, 9.8. That's not a bad. And with the J&J, there were even more so in that they also at that time had South African and Brazilian strains and made sure to include some of those ethnicities. But bottom line, please don't let politics, untrue information keep you from getting the COVID vaccine lives. It has been proven to save lives, so we need to keep our eye on that and not be deterred. It's about trust. So just to go over active versus passive immunity, 2 ways to get active immunity. Either you get the disease or you're vaccinated. Passive immunity is when you get it, they're already pre-made. So breast milk, a breastfeeding mother can passively give it to their infant. You can inject the actual antibodies in. And so what you see now, I kind of liken it to home cooked food and fast food. In home cooked food, the active immunity, you have to cook it. It takes more time. So when your body is presented with a vaccine or the disease, it takes about 2 weeks for it to, right? But it lasts longer. So you have leftovers, as opposed to passive immunity, where you just go to a fast food store, there it is. It works immediately, but short-term fix, no leftovers at home. The myth that the mRNA technology is too new to be trusted comes up a lot. But the truth is that technology is new for vaccines, but it's not new. It's been used in cancer treatment. So we've used this technology before. And some of the advantage of it being used in vaccines is because we manufacture it in a lab. So we have readily available materials, which is another reason why these came out faster. We don't have to wait on growth media and things for that to develop the vaccine. The myth that mRNA vaccines change DNA is certainly not true. DNA is housed in the nucleus. The mRNA vaccines do not enter the nucleus. They do not touch DNA. So I want to make that clear. So when you look at it, just briefly, I don't want to get too technical, but I do feel like it helps to get somewhat of an overview. And let me take myself, okay. So I can't see on my picture, but here. So if you look at the vaccine, both mRNA vaccines work this way, the Pfizer and the Moderna, right? So mRNA, that M stands for messenger. So if you look at the picture, that first row inside the cell, you can see that little squiggly mRNA. That is what is in the vaccines, both Pfizer and Moderna. We give that to you, or they give that to you in the vaccine. That messenger stays in the liquid portion of the cell and tells your own mechanisms of your cell that we use every day for our normal processing. We just borrow our regular machinery and make this little protein. Now our body does that anyway. If something is needed in your body, you need some kind of protein for development, we naturally do that using our own mRNA and DNA. But this mRNA is actually what's in the vaccine, makes the spike protein, and that spike protein is what causes your body to react, to make antibodies against that spike protein, and that's how you're protected. That spike protein is the same, the coronavirus spike protein, and so it's just a little portion of it. It's a protein, no active, and I'll say this again, no active coronavirus, just that little piece to give it your body a sneak preview so you can mount a defense. Sort of like your cameras in a house with a robbery. You get a sneak peek of somebody walking past your house at night, you make sure you arm yourself so the next time you see it, you'll be ready to fight. The J&J vaccine mechanism is a little differently. Now, I was hesitant to put this picture up because you see this adenovirus here, right? And so I can only imagine, oh, now we're getting another virus. This is not true. That is a shell. If you look at that little piece of adenovirus, it's just the outside. Think of it as a gutted house, if you will. We just use that to package, or J&J uses that to package what we want to get into the cell. Now, I will say, that is a little piece of DNA in that cell, and this is the J&J specifically. They do not use the mRNA technology, but they do take a little piece of the DNA of the virus, of the protein, that is, put it into the cell, and then we go again, just like the other one. It starts just one step back. It puts the protein DNA in there, and then your own mRNA makes it. So the difference between the two is how we get that mRNA. One vaccine uses our machinery to produce the mRNA, and the Pfizer and Moderna give you the mRNA manufactured outside. So because DNA is involved in the J&J, you see it does go in the nucleus. However, it doesn't mess with our DNA. It's just for that specific process. So I liken it to the mRNA vaccines. They knock on the door, you don't let them in your house. The J&J, they knock on the door, you let them in the house, but you tell them to sit down and don't touch nothing. Unscathed. All right, so the J&J changes DNA? No, it does not change DNA, even though it enters the nucleus. All right, so these antibodies that the spike protein kind of causes up, this is what helps you fight against the virus, right? It shows you a little piece so you're armed with it. And then if you're, and this slide is a little bit, it just shows you that the antibodies from the point of what we talked about, both Pfizer, Moderna, and J&J use this spike protein to make your body make antibodies against it. So the myth that you can get COVID-19 from the COVID-19 vaccine, You cannot. There is no COVID-19 virus in these vaccines, and that's good. Some of our vaccines that you've probably been vaccinated before actually do contain live virus or a piece of the actual virus in it. These do not, which is good. Sometimes new technology is good. If you see SARS-CoV-V, the CoV-2, that is the name of the COVID-19 virus. So you hear me talk about the COVID-19 virus, well, it has a name, and that's SARS-CoV-2. So if you see it in the literature, it's just the name. Usually when we say COVID-19, we're talking about the disease. I just wanted to make sure that the difference. So if you compare the vaccines, right, just on these issues, the two mRNA, Pfizer and Moderna, are very similar. They both have high efficacy rates of 95 and 94%. Johnson and Johnson. And Johnson & Johnson uses that adenovector like we talked about, and they said it has a 72% rate. Understand this. When Pfizer and Moderna first came out, we weren't contending with those strains, the South African strain and the Brazilian strain. My professional opinion is they're a little bit lower because they took those into accountability, and you see that there. There are AstraZeneca is not approved. I'm going to focus on the three that are approved for emergency use only. You see AstraZeneca, we're putting them through trials. There's some things that have come up that we're looking at that, but the World Health Organization did approve them. All right. The other differences is Pfizer is the only one that's 16 and up. The others are 18 and up. Obviously, if you're allergic to any piece of the vaccine or any part of it, or allergic to the first dose, you shouldn't take it. That is true for everything. J&J has 1 dose. Moderna and Pfizer have 2. Pfizer being 21 days apart and Moderna being the 28 days apart. I will say this, I know Pfizer and Moderna, I know Pfizer does, and Moderna, they have trials now from 12 to 16 and 6 to 11 that are in phase 3 trials. So it is not that they are not safe in children. It is just that we do not like practicing and doing trials on. We start with adults, and once they approve effective, then, and also minor consent. There are a lot of things that go into it, but we work down in categories of age, and we are, and I think even younger than 6 now. These trials are, and they wanted to have it done by the school year. Looks like it might be later in the year to the beginning of the year, but look for those. As far as the effectiveness, when you take like Pfizer and both Pfizer and Moderna, when you take the first dose, you don't have any immunity that day. So when you hear on the news, oh, someone got Pfizer and the Pfizer vaccine or the Moderna vaccine, and 4 days later they got COVID. They got COVID because it takes 2 weeks for the first dose to build up 60% to 60% effectiveness. So a couple of days after the first dose, you're only about 10% better than everybody else. So it's like that home cooked meal. It takes time. So 2 weeks after the first dose, you're up to 60%, which is good, a lot better than 0. However, we know flipping a coin is 50%, right? So you're just a bit better. I will say this. I know in the Israeli study, Pfizer did show 85 effectiveness in that country after the first vaccine. However, this is new data coming out, and we tend to be conservative. So on the day you get your second vaccine, you are still 60% effective. It takes another 2 weeks for you to reach, after the second dose, to reach those 95% effective dates. Very important for you to go. I did get asked the question, well, if Pfizer or the mRNA vaccines have been proven to be 85% effective, should I go back for the second dose? And the answer is yes, you should. And the reason is, we don't know how long these antibodies last. We know how most viruses last. We have a good idea, educated guess, but we really don't. It hasn't been out long enough for us to adamantly say that we know those antibodies last this time. So our working range is about 3 to 6 months. Okay, 3 to 6 months. And so what we do know is that 2 doses, the volume is better than 1 dose, right? So the reason why you go and get the second dose is for durability. You'll have more of it. It will last longer. 2 will last longer than 1. And then secondly, this effectiveness against the new strains. While having new strains, it's very important to get that second dose. It's better to wait. So I've heard this is better to wait for the J&J is 72%. Is it better to wait for Pfizer? Is it better to wait for Moderna? Our country has limited doses. We're getting better, But whichever one comes your way, I would take it. I would take whatever dose came my way, because when it comes to death and dying and morbidity, all three have been shown to be 99 to 100% effective against death and morbidity, right? So what we need to do, again, the COVID vaccine saved lives. Let's keep our eyes on the prize. So with these severe things, 99, all of them to 100% effective. So what about these strains? And I left this slide up because I saw it back when I did it. You see, we have the US wild type. That's what hit our country in January of 2020, right? Then by the end of the year, we got the UK variant came. This variant is more infectious. And so it was always thought that it would be predominantly the strain in our country by the end of March. And if you look at the news now, this is true. This strain has increasingly become the more, I don't know if it's taken all the way over, but it's definitely starting to be the predominant, even for us here. Then we have the South African variant and the Brazilian variant, the variant, and both of those seem to be able to change so that they can kind of trick the vaccine, if you will. I will say this. We hear all that, and I want to say these are not the only strains, right? When you saw those deaths in California about 5-6 months ago now, there was a suspected California strain. There's a suspected New York strain that has a affinity for the nose, smaller in number, but there are still other variants out there that have colossal. So what do we need to do to leave these strains, kind of keep them under wrap? First of all, a virus only mutates when it's replicating. That's why everybody has to get their shot. If we all get the shot and stop the virus from affecting us, it can't replicate if it's not here. The second thing is these vaccines have been shown to have effectiveness against the other strains. So I liken it to a key to your house. When you get the first key to your house, when you make a duplicate of it, it's never quite as good as that original one. Never quite as good as the original one. And as you make more copies, the second one, the third one, that turns out the fifth or sixth key won't even unlock that door. That's what the strains are doing. So the first and second variants from the vaccine, of the virus, our vaccine will still recognize them. It's like the first duplicated key or the second duplicate of the key. But as you get further out and more mutations, they're going to look less like, and the vaccines won't work. So we need to get it now while it still recognizes all of the predominant strains that are out there to some degree, not as much as ours. We need to keep our NPIs, our non-pharmacological interventions, with the wearing of the masks. One thing that we did not know is how much the vaccine actually prevented the spread. We knew it prevented the person that got vaccinated from getting sick. And there's a lot of evidence that it does help stop the spreading of the disease. We just don't know how much. So we get it so once I test negative, so we say once we get the vaccine or the test, I know I'm negative, I'm good. That's not true. You only know for that day. It's like when you set an alarm outside your house, a camera outside your house, and you leave, you're really rest assured that there's nobody there because you see it in the camera. However, once you leave that house, that's not true. So if you expose yourself or you leave your house, or for instance, if you get a test for an STD and you're negative, if you go out and expose yourself that you're not supposed to, that test is no longer valid. So testing is not the only issue. I've said before, 80% of the deaths are people 65 years and older. That's my little Greek mama. And so that's why they were prioritized, right? And that's because I've gotten asked the question, should elderly and people with comorbidities get the vaccine? Absolutely. They're the ones most at risk. And if you already have a sickness, you're going to be, you won't be able to mount a response or fight as hard. Herd immunity. This is important. The only thing you'll hear herd immunity on the news, and what that is, I got caught in that Texas snowstorm. So I think that's when I thought of this example. If you look at a 95% salted road like we have in New York, and by the way, Texas had no salt. I was like, where's the salt? They didn't have any. Anyway, so salt, 95% to salted road. That road's pretty clear. 5% of it is salted, but the 95 that is salted is going to protect you from from an accident. So the 5% becomes less of a problem, right? 85% salted, same thing, right? So the part that is salted protects the couple that's not. That's what herd immunity is. If enough people get vaccinated, and our country said about 85%, you'll hear the news say 85 to 70% of the population is vaccinated. The 15% that don't get vaccinated is enough so that we can save life, just like that road. You won't crash on a 95% road. So as long as the majority of people are vaccinated, it can kind of cover the 5 or so that aren't. And the magic number they're using is 85%. So once we get 85% vaccinated, we're good. We're not there yet by any means. Side effects. So I talk about side effects versus adverse reactions. So the vaccine, sometimes you do have some mild symptoms, but that's first indicative that the vaccine is working. And sometimes the second dose is a little bit more. So I look at it as athletic training, no pain, no gain. First one, you get a few antibodies, that helps. The second one, you increase your training sometimes. I didn't have a bad reaction with either one. And for both vaccines, both Pfizer and Moderna, if you look here, it looks like the number one is headache, it's fatigue. They're very similar. Pain at the injection site, which is a no-brainer every shot. I mean, not every shot, but that's not common with any shot. Can the vaccines cause infertility? No, they cannot. And I won't go into this long detail, but there's a little piece of a placental protein that kind of looks like the spike protein. So that the idea was, well, if we're mounting a response from the spike protein, maybe we'll mount a response against the placental protein. Truth is, the segment that's the same is so small, there's no evidence of that, and it's not small enough. It's like somebody wearing the same hat, right? And not the whole body underneath. And we had something called a natural infection. So although we do not do trials on pregnant women in this country for ethical reasons, 44,000 women actually got COVID. And if that would have happened where the placental protein was attacked, we would have seen miscarriages in the pregnant women that COVID, and none of them did. So as far as the vaccine containing placental fetal cells, what I will say is this slide, I've gotten this asked a lot. So instead of using animals now, we do test these on fetal cells, and what they are is generations. So the actual tissue is like the key. These are decades old. So there's no fetal material in them. And all of them use them as not in us, but on the vaccine. So we tested the vaccine on that before we tested it on us. And you can see Pfizer and Moderna, both, if you look at this chart, the only ones that kind of seem to have used it in the development were the J&J and the AstraZeneca. But again, vaccines we've had already from childhood, they've used this technology for years. This is not new. So for more information, I always like the Center for Disease Control and Prevention. And then there's another Plan Your Vaccine website out there that kind of gives you a game plan for how you can get your vaccine. So my final take points is, for us, it's important for everyone to understand that our vaccine hesitancy is a legitimate fear. This is not something we made up. We need to keep our eyes on the prize because the COVID vaccine saves lives. And I did not mean to rhyme, but hey, it rhymes. Life is about choices. Make sure you make an informed decision, and our body is our temple. Go the extra mile. I've heard people say they didn't want to travel for the second dose because of inconvenience. You should take care of your body first. An ounce of prevention is a worth of cure. The healthier you are, the better you'll do. It's about trust. We have a seat at the table. It's a small seat at the table because there are only 3% of all physicians, and I think Black female physicians only make up about 2 to 3% of all physicians, right? So, but we're here, and that's why I'm here, right? I'm a Black female physician. I was raised in a Black and brown community, trained by Black and brown medical physicians at Howard University College of Medicine, and I'm here to serve Black and brown communities. My father once told me, and that's my father there, he's a vet himself. I lost him a long time ago, but he always told me if my voice was a chorus, someone would hear me. Be encouraged. We have a vaccine. Before we didn't have protection, now we do. We cannot let fear from the past paralyze us from getting a life-saving vaccine. This is our shot. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
And I'll take any questions or.
I mean, that was a very, very informative presentation. I really, I believe I can speak for all of us on that. That was some very great points and details there. So I'm glad you've actually shaved a great many of the questions that I had prepared to direct today for this information. So yeah, great information.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
So at this time, we're going to move forward I'm going to introduce to you all Mrs. Melissa Bishop Murphy, who's from Pfizer. I'll let her introduce herself so you can get a little bit more detail about her, and she'll be presenting with us today as well.
Thank you, Pastor. I am so thrilled to represent Pfizer this evening. Dr. Nance, you've done an excellent job and covered most of my talking points, so I won't be long, but I do want to reiterate several issues that Dr. Nance raised. I am the Senior Director of Government Relations and Multicultural Affairs for Pfizer. And more importantly, I lead Pfizer's Multicultural Health Equity Collective. The collective is a group of external organizations, namely organized medicine organizations, grassroots organizations, legislative organizations. Our goal is to reduce health equity. Our goal is to achieve health equity and reduce healthcare disparities for the multicultural population. And so again, thank you for this opportunity. I too have a disclaimer that I have to read. The Pfizer-BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine has not been approved or licensed by FDA, but has been authorized for emergency use by FDA under emergency use authorization to prevent coronavirus disease 2019 for use in individuals 16 years of age and older. The emergency use of this product is only authorized for the duration of the declaration that circumstances exist justifying the authorization of emergency use under the medical product under Section 564B1 of the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act unless the declaration is terminated or authorization revoked sooner. I also like to encourage you to review our emergency use authorization fact sheet, and I'll put in the chat function the link to that emergency use authorization fact sheet. As Dr. Nance said, the Pfizer-BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine is a messenger RNA-based vaccine. The idea behind messenger RNA is that if you stop the spike protein and you can stop the infection. And so I again won't belabor this because Dr. Nance has done an excellent job. But what I will say to you is that Pfizer believes that our vaccine is safe and efficacious, and you have seen that from our clinical trials in individuals without prior SARS-CoV-2 infection. The observed vaccine efficacy again was 95% after dose 2, 7 days after dose 2. And overall, the efficacy results from our clinical trials show that the Pfizer-BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine at 30 micrograms per dose provides protection against COVID-19 in participants who did or did not have prior SARS-CoV-2 infection. And most importantly, the efficacy was consistent across age, race, and ethnicity demographics. There were no serious safety concerns related to the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine, as reported by the Data Monitoring Committee in the clinical trial. And the clinical trial demonstrates the vaccine is well tolerated across all populations, and the most common side effects were headache and soreness at the injection site. And so I think it's important that we understand the side effects, as Dr. Nance talked about, so that we, Pastor and Bishop, that we are preparing our people that this might happen, so that there's no fear behind it, that they know what to expect when they, especially after getting the second dose of the Pfizer COVID-19 vaccine. I know that there's been questions in regards to access to the Pfizer vaccine and other vaccines. Pfizer has entered into agreement with the U.S. government to provide 300 million doses of the Pfizer vaccine, and the U.S. government has a right to get 300 million more if they would like to exercise that. And frankly, we foresee no issues in delivering on the commitments in regards to the production of those 300 million dosages. It's important to know that the dosages are owned by the U.S. government. The U.S. government has purchased all of Pfizer's vaccines that are produced here in the U.S. And so as we think about access to the vaccines, it's important that organizations like the CC understands that if there's no access or you're having difficulties with access, that we need to engage the state government, in particular the departments of public health. At Pfizer, we will continue to work tirelessly to be as transparent as possible about our supply efforts and to ramp up our manufacturing capacity to help meet demand and combat the COVID-19 pandemic. I would also like to say to Dr. Nance's point that we just reported out some information on clinical trials for the 11 to 15-year-old. And we saw 100% efficaciousness in that group. So we anticipate we will be submitting emergency use authorization for that age 11 to 15 shortly. And we are already enrolling for clinical trials for those younger populations, younger than 11, all the way down to 6 months of age. We also are enrolling for a clinical trial for pregnant women. So I know that there's been a lot of questions around fertility and pregnant women and is it safe? And so we definitely are looking at that as part of our clinical trials. So stay tuned, we'll have results from that, we think over the summer. We realize though that the vaccine will be only effective if people are willing to take it. To that end, we'll work hard to be as transparent as possible in developing the vaccine, and we will continue to do so as we move forward. I'm very proud of the Pfizer leadership. Dr. Nance said it so correctly. The reason we were able to do this so quickly is because a lot of resources, all our clinical trials were paused, our other clinical trials were paused, and all those resources were put towards developing this COVID-19 vaccine. And just so you know, Pfizer took no money from the federal government. So even though there was Operation Warp Speed, we did not take any funding from Operation Warp Speed. We went at risk because we really believe that this pandemic was worth putting all of our resources behind the effort and developing a vaccine. We know that it will take organizations across the country, community leaders, advocacy organizations, policymakers, and other public leaders to share information about the vaccine, the regulatory process, and clinical trial diversity to give our population the information they need, as you said, Pastor, to make an informed decision about whether or not they should take the vaccine. But we know that there's been that disproportionate impact on our community. We saw it so eloquently in Dr. Nance's slides that we are dying at higher rates. And so to me, I've had my vaccine. I'm doing great. And my mom is fully vaccinated. I, as Melissa, would urge everyone to, if you have the opportunity to get the vaccine, because it is so important that we're here for our families. And so again, that's me, but definitely I'm saying to all of you, get the information. And so when you think about COVID-19 resources, I will provide a one-pager of resources. So Dr. Nance referenced the CDC has an excellent toolkit. That's part of the resources that I'll be sharing, and I can put that in the chat for everyone and also send it to the bishop. In closing, I'd like to note that Pfizer, we're so proud of our colleagues who have worked tirelessly this past year to help advance the vaccine given the urgent need from the pandemic. I know I was working every weekend since July, and so I know the scientists were doing much more than I was doing. But it was a yeoman's task, you guys. It was, and we, when I heard that we had gotten emergency use authorization, a lot of people at Pfizer cried that day because we really, really put the effort in because we believe in the science and we believe in our people, and we wanted to make sure that we had something to stop this pandemic. And we're so grateful for the tremendous effort made by the regulatory officials at the FDA. We were talking to them every day to speed up and get the information. So it was a real-time thing. When the data monitoring board would report out the information, it was on a daily basis. And so there were many partners on the federal and state level to develop and implement the COVID-19 vaccine emergency use. So I want to thank all of them. I want to thank you for giving me this opportunity. Thank you for your time. I look forward to answering any questions.
Well, we appreciate the information that you have just given us, Mrs. Bishop Murphy.
Melissa, feel free to call me Melissa.
Well, we really appreciate that. That was some very, very great information as well. I think that myself and Bishop Findlayter can definitely speak for the many of us who are watching and who will be reviewing this event today. The information, I mean, it's just a wealth of information available that those who have any type of reserves would be able to have the information necessary to make an informed decision. So yes, I am very appreciative for each and every one of you guys being here as well. Unless Bishop Findlayter has anything he wants to add, I'll go ahead and move us forward into questions and answers.
No, go ahead, Pastor.
Okay, no problem. So into the Q&A, for those who are watching, if you have any questions that you would like to direct at this time to Ms. Melissa or to Dr. Nance, you are able to do so inside of the chat. They'll be glad to answer whatever it is that you post in that section. I'm going to go ahead and direct questions. Again, if you have any questions, post them. We definitely go ahead and try to get those answered. The first question that I have, and you have shaved, as I've said, Dr. Nance, you've shaved a great many of my questions off. So I don't want to be redundant, but I'm going to ask some of the questions. And if you have an answer to it, if you've already answered, if you wouldn't mind or care to elaborate, we'll be glad to get these answered. The first question that we have, what is really the difference between the three vaccinations? We know we have the three main that are approved, Johnson & Johnson, Pfizer, and Moderna, but is there any type of distinguishment or difference between these three?
Yes. So in the slide that I had, so Moderna and Pfizer, because they use the mRNA technology, those two are very, very similar in how they work, similar in the two doses. One just being Pfizer has 21 days between them and Moderna has 28 days between them. The other difference is Pfizer did take the trial down to 16 years of age. So it's the only one that you can get from 16. All the others are at 18 years of age, but the two are similar, even in storage, as far as requiring cold temperatures, one more than other, but colder temperatures. The J&J is a different technology. The J&J, and with that being said, Pfizer and Moderna also have similar side effects. I will say this, all of them actually do. But J&J is not an mRNA vaccine. It is it uses that adenovector instead. So that's a very big difference in the way that the vaccine uses our body to protect us. With that being said, they're both safe. It's just different. J&J is only one dose. So it's ideal in patients who are hard to get to, a homeless person, someone you don't think that's going to listen to the doctor and come back a second time for the second dose, right? There's a subset. That's where you get the art of medicine versus science of medicine. So you have a key population, and that would be most beneficial in those. The effectiveness that you see, the effectiveness, and we're talking about more mild and moderate disease. They, as I said, all three are 99 and 100% effective against
Yeah.
death. So that's
That's the key, right, Dr.
yes,
Nance? Like, we
yes,
want to live. We want
yes,
to live.
yes, ma'am. And please, I mean, I have a lot of patients, and I find it funny that I stopped watching after 500,000 deaths, to be honest, from COVID-19 disease. But as far as, there have been a couple instances. I think we have like 2 or 3, a handful of deaths that we're still looking at. None have been proven to be so far yet from the vaccine. There are some cases where they're investigating further, and I think there might be one they're looking into. But what I will say is when you have 500,000, 560, whatever the last count was from disease, please be more afraid of the COVID-19 disease than the vaccine.
And what I would also like to say, to add on to Dr. Nance, is we are the study for Pfizer is a 2-year study. So first of all, it was unheard of to get 46,000 participants, 43,000 of them got both doses. Unheard of in a vaccine clinical trial, to have that many people enrolled. So, but we are still getting data. So every day we learn something new, but it's been consistent, right? In terms of the data that Dr. Nance I have shown you. But just so you know, we still are monitoring safety and efficacy. We just came out, I believe it was last week, Dr. Nance, where we showed that the vaccine was, after 6 months, was still efficacious. So we're as more data comes in, again, 2-year study, we will be putting that information out as we get it, because again, we want to be transparent with what we're seeing in the clinical trials.
Great. We have a couple of questions that had came into the chat. The first question is, do we know how long the Pfizer vaccine will last? And will this be a yearly shot? I want to add a little piece onto that. And in that question, will there be a need for another vaccine potentially, or a booster?
I'll start, Dr. Nance, and then if you'll want to add, again, we just released information that's showing that we are efficacious still after 6 months. Again, we don't know, it could be longer than that. Certainly, we are looking at the possibility of a booster, so we're already exploring that, Pastor. We also are, in terms of the variants, testing against the variants as well. I believe we also sent something out in the last few weeks in regards to efficacious against the UK variant, the South African and the Brazilian, but not as efficacious as just the standard COVID-19. So the short answer to that is stay tuned in regards to the booster. But we know that it continues to be efficacious currently, and definitely efficacious in the prevention of death for certain.
The second question that came into our chat was, how long am I protected after taking 2 doses of Pfizer?
Same answer. We're still getting the information, but we know at least 6 months.
Okay. Our next question, well, there's a comment, was why are so many people dying when they take the vaccine, especially when the Pfizer, even though we know many have gotten the vaccine, are all right? How do we stop people from dying who take the vaccine, who want to be safe and remove the fear factor? I'm not quite understanding this question.
Yeah, because we don't have data showing that people are as Dr. Nance saying, we're still looking at the data, but there's no widespread deaths as a result of taking the Pfizer vaccine or any other vaccine. Dr. Nance, I want to defer to you as the medical person on the panel.
Yes, and so you will see, so one of my slides said 80% of people who died from COVID vaccine were over the age of 65, right? So it's very hard in a disease that predilects the elderly. Could it be of natural causes? I remember Hank Aaron, the baseball great, he died 2 weeks after taking the vaccine. And initially it was like, oh, he died from the vaccine. But as you look into it, if you see the further studies, it was determined that it was from natural causes. He was 88 years old. And so when you vaccinate a large amount of elderly and you see a lot of deaths, some of it is that. Now, younger people have died too, but usually from COVID, the disease. But the vaccine has not been associated with the deaths that they're talking about. And so, that's where you can draw analogies that we want to wait for the science to prove. And so far, we don't see it. I can understand where people would be suspicious because obviously, if somebody took a shot and then 2 days later something happened, it would be easy for your mind to be like, it was because of that. But what we're seeing from the science is that's not true. And we're continuing to work that out. I think the reason why Melissa said that it was because of 6 months out is we're only 6 months out. So we're being 100 trips. We cannot tell you what happened since 7 months out. This is a new vaccine. We only have 6 months of data. As the year goes on in 12 months, we'll be able to tell you even more. But from right now, we're not seeing that. So it's important to remember, we're learning as you learn. We're collecting the data as it is given to us. And so I would definitely, to reassure anybody, I guess the body of that question, the vaccine is safe. If you always, in any situation, I don't care if it's business, whatever you do, risk versus benefit, right? The benefits of the vaccine far outweigh the risks. And I believe we even have those numbers that over 500,000 people died from the disease as opposed to some questionable ones. That would be my answer.
Thank you. So the next question, it actually kind of goes along with a little bit of what you've said. My question was, is the vaccine a safety risk for elderly or for those who have pre-existing medical conditions?
So absolutely not. Those are the people who need it most. I remember doing a teleconference with pastors who I know you have to inform the community and may not feel good because you're a medical doctor. I had a pastor tell me, I don't feel good telling somebody with a comorbidity or elderly person to go get the vaccine until I'm convinced that it's safe. And so I said, Pastor, blame me. I am a medical doctor. I know it is safe. And elderly and people with challenges or certain diseases are more at risk. They're the ones who need it the most. So my professional opinion, anybody who is of age, anybody period, but especially those of age or who are have some comorbidities that won't allow them to fight as a younger person would.
Great. Another question would be, well, we've covered this, so please excuse me. If someone takes the first vaccine, but does not take the second dose as scheduled, will they still be able to take the second dose, or will they need to restart the process?
So Pfizer, I know you have indications for the specific vaccines. So I know that if you take the first dose, you should complete the series. Now, as far as the packet insert, and also what I saw one time is that somebody got a Pfizer dose and then was given a Moderna dose, and that's a no. I don't know why that was done, but please, if you get a Pfizer dose, make sure that the second dose is Pfizer. And similarly, if you get Moderna, there's a second dose of Moderna, because there was an incident where that did not happen. Second thing, I am sure it depends on there. We do have some flexibility. So even though you say 28 days for Moderna, I know you can get it up to 35 days after, right? And you could probably even get it after that, not recommended, right? So would it work? It probably give you some, but could it hold to the efficacies that we studied, the efficacies that we know? I would say if it were my patient and you went outside a window, I'd make you repeat it. But Melissa, I'll let you answer because I know the packet insert from Pfizer probably has
And
specific.
because it's emergency use authorization, Dr. Nance, it definitely needs to stick to for the Pfizer, the 21 days. But I do know, just like in the real world, we are seeing states spread that out a little bit more than that. But I definitely would say, well, I've also seen though, and I think it was also due more to the weather and the ability to vaccinate. So early on, you were seeing it maybe not sticking to the schedule. I think that as access has increased, you're seeing the 21 days for Pfizer in terms of that second dose. So we say 21 days based on the EUA, emergency use authorization approval.
Great. Great. So the next question that we have would be, why is the COVID-19 vaccination free? As we know, every prescription and vaccination has an associated cost, which is commonly billed to the insurance providers or to the patient. Would anyone be able to answer that question?
So I say that it is free because our government is providing us a service, which is the opposite of Tuskegee, right? This is a cure, if you will, or a prevention technique, right? And so it is free because the government got involved at this level to give it to everyone, regardless of cost. Now, I will say this. I don't know how many of you have gone to a clinic, but they'll ask you if you have insurance when you fill out those little things online, because their intent is to maybe recoup that if you have insurance. So you will not be charged for it. But if you tell them you have a certain insurance, which I know most people ask, you can go without it, but they will try to recoup it from your insurance to keep the cost going. So if you have insurance, it's free because we want it to be free for everyone. But if you have an insurance that would pay for it, it helps the company to know that, because if your company would pay for it, they'll try to recoup it. We do it in the military all the time. We give out fee, one of our airmen all get free services, right? And so, but if there's a policy in place, our veterans or something that we can do help offset the cost, we will. So the answer to your question is, this is a worldwide issue, right? You being safe means me being safe. And so the government has taken that approach. And if you saw on the news, and I'm not getting into politics, I'm a lieutenant colonel in the Air Force. I love you guys, but I'm not trying to say any missteps. What I will say is, if you heard them say it's a world problem, if we have extra, we're going to give it to the world. There's a Brazilian strain. There's a South African strain. We are not immune from those. We can see that. There's a Britain strain. The cure is the whole world should have it for free. So we're working to make sure we all get it done.
Well said, Dr. Nance. It is free because we are in the middle of a worldwide pandemic. Short answer. And it started elsewhere, but look how it's gotten to the U.S. and killed over 500,000 Americans. And so that's why it's free.
Thank you guys for answering that. Yes, Dr. Nance, that was a very great answer. Next question would be, who are authorized to administer these vaccinations?
Authorized.
I think it depends on the state that you live in, because I know that in some states they're expanding who can vaccinate because of this is a pandemic. So access to the vaccine also has to be access to those who can give the vaccine, right? So we know, Dr. Nance showed you in terms of the number of physicians, we can't just rely on physicians to get vaccinate. We can't just rely on pharmacists to vaccinate. So I would say it depends on which state you live in terms of who has now been given authorization to give vaccinations. But typically it is nurse practitioners, it is nurses, it is pharmacists and physicians. Dr. Nance, I'm missing sort of the bright line ones.
Yeah, so whenever you have a crisis, I don't care what aspect, you start thinking outside the box, right? Dentists can give shots. You ever got Novocaine from a shot? There are a lot of professionals that you may not think, but I know our dentists can give shots. Veterinarians give shots, right? They're giving shots is, it sounds complicated, but it's really not, right? It's the same, although I don't know if I would be able to know where exactly on a dog to do it, but I'm saying it's the same thing. And so please don't think that they're just grabbing miscellaneous people. Most of these have some kind of training, right? So like I said, that Novocaine shot in my mouth from that dentist, he's done it thousands of times. So in the Air Force, we're using our medical technicians who give shots all the time, right? Not so much in the civilian sector. And as you said, all the medical professionals, but we got creative. Dentists can give them, veterinarians, it's things they do all the time. We're not going to take somebody who hasn't given a shot shot before and train them. And by the way, even our medical technicians, you see the National Guard responding to help, they undergo a special training just for that shot. So in addition to them knowing how to give the vaccine, there are specific indications and there are specific instructions for that shot. And to be honest with you, down to the storage, I had to take a training on how to the correct temperatures to store vaccines, because it's no use giving a vaccine that wasn't stored correctly and being effective. So though, even if you know how to get a vaccine, give a vaccine, you get extensive training on how to care for that vaccine until it gets in the arm.
Thank you. And we're going to take one last question, and that question is, will the vaccine be effective for a person who has tested positive with COVID in the past?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So again, we don't know how long the antibodies last. And remember, active antibodies come from either getting the disease or the vaccine. So let's say that big surge that happened last year in my hometown, New York City. We don't know if you got it back in March. It's March again. That's 13 months. So even though you had it, how many antibodies you still have, right? We know you can keep it from the vaccine after 6 months. But we don't know their antibody tests. I mean, we could test everybody, but the point being is absolutely, if you already got the COVID-19 disease, you absolutely need the shot, because we don't know how they last, and they also help you against the strains. You're still susceptible to whatever other strain you didn't get. So absolutely.
Thank you. Bishop Findlayter, this is in your
Right.
hands.
Great. Miss Melissa from Pfizer, thank you for sharing all of that great information. Dr. Nance, thank you. Our audience is much more informed because of both of you, and we really appreciate you. And to my brother and co-host, Pastor Priester, thank you and bless you. Listen, we are the United Covenant Church of Christ, and we do more than having church. We want to educate our people. We want to inform our people. And that's why we're here tonight. And we're appreciative of these professionals who, after hours, after work, have come to share. Our community is under siege. We are in trouble, and we need for you to get vaccinated. I'm vaccinated. Pastor Priester, are you vaccinated?
Yes, sir. I actually had taken my vaccination a couple of days ago. Been diagnosed, have been dosed with the first, I've taken the first dose on Tuesday. So, yes, sir.
All right, so both of us are vaccinated, and you need to get vaccinated. The vaccine is safe. Again, we thank you for being with us tonight. If you're a pastor and you're not connected with a fellowship, we invite you to be a part of the United Covenant Churches of Christ. Our leader is Bishop G.E. Livingston. We'll love to have you. Good night to all of you. The Lord bless you real good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Have a great evening.